What is up, y'all? We are back with another episode of Boss Up with BBI, and I'm your girl, Jice Johnson. We are here every week talking about all things money and mindset in the Black community. So, I want to talk about the Buy Black myth and what we need to be doing about it. So, this topic is a little bit of a for me, this topic is a little bit touchy because, of course, with the Black Business Initiative, I'm always like, buy Black, buy Black, buy Black all the time. I wholeheartedly believe in buying Black. And I'm going to just give you like the upfront right now. There's nothing wrong with buying Black, but we have to understand that buying Black is not solely the answer to our economic woes. And I want to dig into that, and I want to dig into it real early. We are talking about money and mindset in the Black community. And so a lot of the things that we're going to be digging into this year are going to circulate around how we think with regards to our economic status, how we can begin to move that forward, the types of things we need to be doing with our money, the types of things we need to be doing to build generational wealth, to build up, I want to say generational wealth, yes, but also to build up ourselves in our current generation. We need to be thinking multiple generations down the line, but it has to start with us. And so we have to have a better understanding of how we are ranking economically, what that actually means, what are some of the things we need to be doing so that we can begin to really set up the foundational blocks so that our future generations have something to build and run off of. So I think, digging into some of the controversial topics, all of the topics around what we need to be doing financially are just not sexy. But I think that this is, something that we should be addressing early on. So before I jump in too far, I want to make sure that you subscribe, that you like, that you share. So if you are, audio only, you can still support this podcast via Anchor. You might be listening on Spotify. The other way is to be on YouTube. So if you are watching me on YouTube, what's up? And make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. And then don't forget, guys, that you can support this podcast, support the efforts of independent Black media. You can donate. We do have some regular donations that come on Anchor, and you can also donate on YouTube, and then you can also go to BBIProfessional.com and you can donate there as well. So that is what's up. Make sure that you support independent Black media. As you know, we are now CTN media, so that is changing the narrative media, and that's what we're here to do. So make sure that you support that. All right, so I want to dig into this topic, and I want to start off by acknowledging that buying Black is not a new concept at all. It at least dates back to like Garvey and earlier, but just to understand that buying Black is not a new concept, but it is something that we've been talking about lately in our community. There are a lot of like buy Black campaigns. And so in the way that our, media is working now, it's easier for us to spread a message about buying Black. It's easier for us to share information around where you can find Black-owned products, Black-owned services, so on and so forth. I make concerted efforts to buy Black, in particular on the back end side, and I'm going to dig into that a little bit more as well. But in particular, like the people who service me, I work hard to make sure that they are Black owned as often as possible. And that's not always the easiest thing to do. It's not always the most cost effective thing to do. And so some of that kind of, shoots us in our foot, right? Like we are a socioeconomic group that has to be figuring out exactly and being strategic about exactly where our dollars go. And then oftentimes, because we are in this socioeconomic group, we then also, in effort to support our own people, may be spending more money than where we could go, if we were to go and support another socioeconomic group, right? And so, but we're gonna start digging into that. So let me not jump ahead. So we have to understand that buying Black is not a new concept, but it is something that is being pushed on a nationwide and even on a global level. There are a lot of people who are focusing in on beginning to create some intercontinental, you know, Lord have mercy, I'm already stumbling over my words, y'all. An intercontinental exchange, right? So you have people, for instance, from Ghana and from other countries on the continent of Africa working to, you know, do some trade with us over here in America. So things are happening. Buying Black is like this big thing. Oh, you have this, buy from a Black owned company, buy from a Black owned company, buy from a Black owned company. And, you know, there are ways that we can continue to circulate those dollars, because getting our businesses consistent income helps with the stability and the ability to scale for that individual business. And then eventually over time as a whole, businesses that grow in stability, and then also that are able to have that consistent income and a growth in profits and a growth in revenue, are then able to begin to hire. Hiring is a huge component in how we create a stable economic base. So, you know, there are all those things, right? You also have the ability for an organization to go from renting a space to buying a space, to maybe buying a space larger than what they need so that they can also rent out the space, which creates additional revenue and things of that sort. So there's a lot of ways in which Buying Black can be very helpful for our community. It is something that we need to continue to do. We need to have that thought process at the forefront of our mind. But where I want to really like dig into the myth portion is how this closes the wealth gap, and how Buying Black really, you know, kind of contributes to the bottom line of our economy. And so first, let's acknowledge that wealth helps to create additional wealth. This is literally like the whole premise of intergenerational wealth. You want to become wealthy so that you can pass along wealth to your future generations, not so that they can live off of your wealth, but so that they can take your wealth and then utilize that, grow wealth on top of it, and then move that on into the next generation, right? So generation after generation after generation, the idea would be that you create a foundation, and that foundation, and then your future generations continue to build on that foundation, and it continues to grow. So we get that wealth creates wealth, but it didn't start there with how America, you know, really got started, and a lot of white wealth in America got started. And so while wealth is definitely, while, you know, circulating dollars helps to sustain wealth, helps to circulate and can help build wealth, it isn't really like, wealth isn't really a result of dollars circulating in the white community. That's not how they built their wealth. They didn't build their wealth because they were focused in on buying Black. Actually, if you really, you know, begin to look at that, a lot of times they had to make trades with the Native Americans that were here. They had to make trades with other cultures. You know, you have the spices, you have the gold, you have, you know, cloth, you have certain fruits, or, you know, certain meats or whatever. So now we're swapping, right? So wealth was not created initially through the circulation of dollars like we assert that it is now. The wealth of the white community, the mainstream community, as it is here in particular in America, is really a result of government giveaways, free labor, tax incentives, and policy. So understand that a broad mixture of that, like the government coming over, when people were coming over here to establish themselves, the government gave away land. So you didn't have to go, you didn't have to save up and buy it. You didn't have to finance it. You didn't have to go into debt for it. They gave it to you. And then you had the ability to work that land to produce something that you could then sell out on the broader market, right? You could rent out that land to people who maybe didn't have access to that land or didn't get that free giveaway. So there was the giveaway of resources, land, rights, things of that sort, right? Then there was also the free labor, which obviously was our lineage, right? So the fact that they brought slaves over here, and created a free labor source. So there's that. Then there was also things like tax incentives, you know, the saying, you know, there's two things certain in life, death and taxes. So taxes obviously has been around for a very, very very long time. And through tax incentives, you know, being able to not have to pay certain taxes or getting a break on those taxes and, you know, so on and so forth, allow people to maintain what they had. And then of course there's the policy that supports certain types of things. So right now policy is one of the largest things that we need to focus on. Again, I'm not going to jump ahead, I'll get there, but we need to understand how important policy is. When we are buying Black, that is a proactive side on our community to support someone else in the community who we know is at a disadvantage, and we want to help stabilize them. That does not excuse, change, alter, fix any of the underlying policy that put us in that detrimental situation in the first place, that put us in that disadvantaged situation in the first place. So when we are buying Black, that is an effort to support us. The circulation of dollars mean that if you're going to spend it, hell, spend it with me so that my family can eat. So then I'm spending something with someone else. And if I can spend it back in our community, we can circulate those dollars. So dollar circulation, now that the currency is already, you know, the system is already in place, is a component. But understanding that that is not how white wealth was created, and that is not in fact how Black wealth is really truly going to be created, especially not just with our dollars. We need to circulate dollars inside of our community. And I'm just going to like segue or side note here for a second to even talk about my own evolution in that process. Because when I started the Black Business Initiative, it was just like everything Black. I don't even want no dollars in this organization that aren't Black. Like I literally didn't even want sponsors that weren't Black. In my mind, it was like, if you are a Black owned company, you need to be supporting the work of building Black entrepreneurship and building Black businesses. And so I want all of my sponsors to be Black. So that is the only we were the only people that I pitched to. We were the only people that I talked about investing inside of the Black Business Initiative. It was a journey for me to come around to the idea or the notion that there are other organizations that should be investing inside of the Black Business Initiative. Why? Because we're owed. They built their wealth off of our back, and then we say, don't give us your wealth. Don't give us what you have. We'll take care of it ourselves, right? When they built what they had off of us. And so at the end of the day, you know, I'll give you one of my examples. Like I'm going to say this, and then who knows where it'll go, because I'm actively like pitching towards Wells Fargo. But like Wells Fargo, we know Wells Fargo built their wealth off of slaves. We know that that bank was built off through slave labor, traded slaves as currency. I mean, the whole everything, right? Like they are completely culpable. So if I need a sponsor, why wouldn't I go and tell them to sponsor what we're doing? Why wouldn't I tell them I need 100 Black entrepreneurs to be able to get into this workshop, get into this seminar, get into this summit for free, and you need to pay for it? Why wouldn't I do that? And so, you know, there are times that I think we look at going into the system as being like this sellout situation, when the reality is that all that their dollars were built off of our back, and they should be making sure that we have access. You should be able to get the information. I should be able to provide it to you at no cost. Now a whole nother segue of a segue would be the value of investing in yourself, but that's a whole different situation. Like you do actually have to invest in yourself. And so it's not that you should get it for free per se. It's that because there's a thing that sometimes, you know, mentally that we have to clear with what free looks like or no cost looks like, but understanding that the value of what you're being provided is not actually at no cost. The question is, who's footing the bill? Is it you, or is there another organization or another something that could be or should be footing the bill for you on behalf of the fact that they made their wealth, and the only reason why they have that money is because of you or because of your ancestors, right? And so thinking through from that aspect, or thinking through from that standpoint, we have to understand that that there are policies and things like that that are in play, and that those are key places that we need to be focusing in on as we begin to build. So I want to repeat that. I want us to acknowledge that white wealth is not a result of circulating dollars, and Black wealth is not going to come purely from circulating our dollars. That there has been government giveaways, free labor, tax incentives, and policy that have created this soup, this like perfect brew, this, fabulous cuisine to allow for white wealth, allow for these white men in particular to be eating, right? That was the recipe that gave them this meal that they are eating from, and that their children are eating from, and their children's children are eating from, right? And we over here with the scraps and the leftovers and all of that, we over here trying to make a 5-course meal with their leftovers. Not even like their leftovers, like the shit they didn't threw in the trash, right? So we need to understand what kind of like where we're at and what that looks like. So one of the things that I struggle with is that we tend to focus on the wrong things. I'm gonna talk about 3 of them. There's a whole lot of places that we focus in on the wrong things. So let me not make it seem like we finna dig into all of them, because we're not. But I want to talk about 3 in particular. So I want to talk about the fact that when we talk about buying Black, more often than not, we are looking at the retail or the consumer side. When we are looking at the retail and the consumer side, we need to acknowledge that we are still a consumer. One of the biggest issues inside of our community is that we are consumer based. This isn't necessarily an issue that's going to close the wealth gap. This is about how we view ourselves. This is about Black empowerment. This is about propaganda that has been pushed on us. This is about keeping us as this lower class because it constantly pushes us to prove through material things that we are worthy of life, of happiness, of free time, of vacations, of experiences, of health care, of education. I mean, we continuously push from a materialistic standpoint to say that our lives are worth something. So when I think of consumerism and I think of the way that we talk about buying Black, we talk about buying Black purely from this consumeristic standpoint. It is how on the retail end do we purchase something from somebody else. The reality is that we should be opening up our doors in most cases to all green dollars. So you should not, unless you have a really, really specific product for the Black community, you should not be just catering to the Black community. That includes all your soaps and lotions and body butters. One thing that Shea Moisture did, now I didn't particularly like when they sold, however, then they went and bought I can't remember what media company, what was it in Black Enterprise or BET? No, they didn't buy BET. What am I talking about? I feel like they bought Black Enterprise. Don't quote me because I'm really just going off on this example on the fly. But when Shea Moisture sold, so a little bit before Shea Moisture sold, they were in the media, in Black media at least, for being the sellout because they basically expanded their marketing to include other people. And it was just well, you built your brand off of the backs of Black people, and now you're catering to, Becky and Sue with the red hair and and when you talk about curls, you ain't talking about their curls, you're talking about our curls, right? So it was this whole huge thing. And I was like, guys, we don't even get it. Shea Moisture would only grow to be so big if their only target was the Black community. They absolutely should target other communities. Look at however all the other communities target you. L'Oreal targets you all the time. Procter & Gamble targets you all the time. What was the other one? L'Oreal, Procter & Gamble. It's going to come back to me. There's another big one. Oh God, it's right on the tip of my tongue too. It'll come back to me. But these companies and organizations, they target you. And the worst part about it is you're cut out of all the wealth when it comes to how they are building. So they are producing, manufacturing, distributing all of these products that are marketed towards you, but you don't participate on any of the dollars that are circulating over there. And then you get mad when one of us decides that we're going to go and target to them so that we can take part in getting those dollars circulating into our community. So we have to really think this through, because oftentimes we are focused on the wrong thing. So we are focused on retail and consumer versus being focused on producing, manufacturing, logistics, distribution, which distribution is a part of logistics, but it ain't all of logistics. But like, these are the things that we should be focusing on when we're talking about buying Black. How can you distribute from a Black retailer? Your product can be for anybody, but is the person who's selling it Black, so that they're taking in those consumer dollars? Who's manufacturing it? Are they Black? Who is doing all of your graphics? Who is doing your accounting? Who is doing your legal work? Who is doing all of the back end things? Are those organizations Black? Who are you banking with? Is that bank Black? Recognize that banking Black, like buying Black, is not going to be the end all be all. And that's a whole like deeper conversation of how small Black owned banks are in the playing field of, of banks, right? But just understand that like all of our Black banks put together don't equal JP Morgan and Chase. Forget Bank of America and Wells Fargo, because like those are basically like the top three, right? JP Morgan, Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. Now, not to say there are not others, but I'm just saying those are like the biggest three. And all of our Black owned banks combined don't even equal JP Morgan and Chase. Matter of fact, I think if we wanted to really put it into perspective, and perspective is really key, y'all, like context and perspective cannot ever be overlooked. If we really want to put into perspective, all of Black America basically like could fit under JP Morgan and Chase. Okay, so we need to be a little bit more focused on producing, manufacturing, and like logistics and distribution. We need to be thinking about those things. And there's a lot of opportunity in there with the right types of policy. And I'm saying that because we need to also understand that like at this point, some people, some organizations have certain parts like almost on lock. So when I'm saying there's opportunity for there to be a Black owned manufacturer of, or distributor of, or logistics company of, or producer of, not necessarily saying that the opportunity is the fact that, there's a gap. It could be saturated. It could be tough to break into, but the fact that there would not be a Black owned one, which would then give our Black owned companies another space in which they can circulate their dollars, right? So just like recognizing that that's there. But one of the things is we focus on the wrong thing. That we focus on the wrong thing, being retail and consumer instead of producing and manufacturing. The second one that I want to point out is things like I mentioned, the tax incentives. Okay, we open up a lot of nonprofits. It's almost like it hurts my heart sometimes. I can't even tell you how many people are like, I have this really great idea. I have this nonprofit that I want to open up. And I have to stop myself because sometimes I really just want to be like, stop. I don't even want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you. It's the same way I feel about soap and lotion companies. But, I love everybody though. But this nonprofit situation is like out of control. And what we're not doing is we're not opening up the foundations. So here's the thing. Okay, so a nonprofit gives you a write-off. If you are the actual organization itself, it means that you are tax exempt. If I donate to the organization, I can get a tax write-off. You know who is sheltering money are the foundations, not the write-offs. Who's sheltering the money is the foundations. We are not building Black foundations. We're opening up Black nonprofits. So here's the difference. Let's say that you go and file your taxes and you think because you've donated to your favorite nonprofit of choice that you have some big write-off coming to you. You're giving away 10% of your income to your tithes and offering at church, and you're going to have some tax write-off come to you, right? Here's the crazy thing. If you don't file a Schedule A, you don't have any tax write-offs coming to you. If you don't know what a Schedule A is, you're not filing a Schedule A. Like, everybody doesn't get those tax write-offs, guys. That's not what everybody gets. You have to have something in order to get a Schedule A. So basically, like, let's say if you're single, if you are married with no kids, if you are head of household, like most like with no assets, like most likely you're not filing a Schedule A. So all those deductions that you think you're getting, you're not even getting. They don't even matter. All the money you've been spent at church, all the places that you want to donate to. The nonprofit game is like a funny ass game. You got people who are out here trying to do the work on behalf of social, something or other, right? Doing something that is socially beneficial, socially acceptable. And the reality of it is that they're only giving out 5% of their dollars anyway. They are giving out so little of their dollars. And then on top of that, 97% of the dollars that they give out in the philanthropic world go back to white men. So peep this, right? You put white people are putting money in foundations to shelter themselves from tax. Those foundations are giving away only 5% of their portfolio, and then they're giving 93% of that 5% back in the hands of white men in the form of grants where they don't have to pay taxes on it. Crazy, right? Okay, we're not building foundations. We're opening up nonprofits. So you see how we're like focusing on the wrong things. Okay. The third one is that we have this really big push on social versus political. And social is like the feel-good stuff. It's what feels good. It feels good that I can shop where you shop, sit on the bus where you sit. It feels good that you can't tell me nothing. I can walk in where I want to go. I can go to whatever park I want to go to. I can drink at whatever water fountain I want to drink out of. And I can push for more representation in media. I can push for more representation in the movies. I can push for more imagery to be on the retail shelves so that when I go and buy my daughter a doll, I can buy her a black doll. All that is social. It's not political. It's not policy changing. It's feel good. This is what makes me feel good. This is what makes me feel empowered despite the fact that I don't actually have any power. It's what feels good versus what is good. And it's not that, the social part, I get it, it matters. I live out in this city on the outskirts of Denver. And since I've been here, for the 2 years I've been here, I've been harassed more by the police than the whole 6 years I lived in Aurora, Colorado. That is a social issue. And it's one that really disturbs me. Like, I am constantly having to lay out all of my credentials for some of these white folks who think they just finna come over here and try and tell me, in particular, these white police officers who be coming over here. I had these guys come over here. They were rude. They didn't want to give me their name. They didn't want to give me their badge number. This one guy was like, "Are you an attorney?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." Shut him up, right? I'm not, but he don't know that. And so he was like, "Well, are you an attorney?" And I was like, "Yes, I am actually." And then he was like, well, he had to try and clean that up because he didn't know what he was supposed to say after that because he didn't expect that, right? But it's like, I get from the social aspect how irritating it is. It irritates the mess out of me when I'm looking at these dumb ass people and I'm thinking like, I am way smarter than you. I'm way better in all these areas of you. I just feel like I'm worth more than you are. And now I got to listen to you, talk something crazy to me. Or if I want to report, if I'm trying to report these police officers, who am I turning to? More police officers. How does that help me, right? So it's like, the social aspect is not to say it shouldn't be addressed, but it should be secondary to the political. Because at the end of the day, what matters is your actual power, not how you feel about being empowered or the feeling of empowerment when you don't actually have the power to create, change, or exact anything in your life. So we end up focusing on these wrong things. So I want to I want us to begin to shift where our focus goes. Again, like not thinking that buying Black is wrong, but shifting the way that we think because our focus is not in the right place. We can shift our dollars even though there aren't enough dollars circulating in the Black community, like we can still shift our dollars. That's important. But we need to have some perspective on what big numbers look like. And it's interesting because, this idea of this $1.2 trillion, like this is something that bothers me. If you'll notice, I rarely ever talk about the buying power or the spending power of the Black community. When I'm talking about Black economics, I'm not talking about this fictitious 1 trillion dollars that people think we have, because it is one of the biggest cons in this whole push for Black capital and Black capitalism and buying Black and banking Black. That is ridiculous. Banks are repeating this number. This is a propagandized number. There is no actual calculation that says that Black people have $1.2 trillion of spending power. Spending power, buying power. What does this mean? If I go to buy a $40,000 car, did I have $40,000 or did I access $40,000 via a loan? I'll wait. In most cases, I access the $40,000 via a loan, but that whole $40,000 is going to be attributed to my buying power or my spending power inside of the Black community. Now, here's the catch. I qualified for a car loan for the $40,000. I didn't have $40,000 that I could access that I could then spend as needed where I wanted to, not to make an investment somewhere, not to purchase an income producing asset, not to purchase even a basic asset like a home. It gives me the ability to purchase a depreciating asset. I purchase a car, I have to pay on it. It is not an asset until it's paid off, and in the meantime, the value of it depreciates. That's what I got the loan for. I got a loan for something that's going to be that I'm going to pay more than the $40,000 that the car costs, and the car is not going to be worth $40,000. That's what that $40,000 counted towards this fictitious $1.2 trillion. I hope that some of y'all caught that. I don't know if I need to repeat that. I talk fast. Let me try and slow that down. Lean in. There is no $1.2 trillion that Black people have. What we have is the ability to get loans to buy depreciating assets. That includes your student loans. That's included in this $1.2 trillion. Your student loans, your car loans, your mortgages are included in there, your credit cards. The only thing that was a potentially appreciating asset is the home. Potentially, because understand that our homes are valued less when you moved in. So when Brad and Becky own that home, it could be worth $50, $75, $250, $500,000 more than it's worth when you moved in. Some Black people's homes have lost value. So that's why I say potentially. But we need to understand that this $1.2 trillion is a myth. And we need to stop using it. And it's used by a lot of people who I really respect. But it's wrong. And we need to call it out. There's not $1.2 trillion worth of nothing that we have access to that we can spend at our discretion. If I opt not to get that car, I don't have $40,000 to go spend. I can buy that car or I can have nothing. That's not buying power. Okay, so now I'm not going to really get into industry because I feel like that's a whole big topic. But I want to acknowledge as I kind of move over into what we can do about it is that the internet is good for individual wealth, but it's not scalable. So if you build an internet business, which is predominantly based off of your brand, I'm not saying all internet businesses, like technology can be a scalable business, but so I just want you to be clear. I'm not saying all internet businesses, but a lot of internet businesses are built off of a brand, or they're built on like a multi-level marketing type of a format or whatever. And there's not a way to necessarily scale, and there's not necessarily a way to pass on to your future generations. So if I build this organization, I build it purely off of my brand. If I die, or when I die, does not necessarily mean that my legacies, my children or my grandchildren are going to be able to monetize or capitalize on this same business model. So I can make some investments out of it. Maybe I can bring them on so that at some point there could be a transition, and then their name is attached with that brand, and it's just as strong or stronger and yada, 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 right? So I'm not saying that this is the nothing whatever, but we need to acknowledge that, like, in a lot of cases, the internet business models that we're building are not scalable, especially if they're built off of your individual brand. So it allows for, like, in the here and now, to kind of create a more even playing field. It doesn't discriminate as much. The policies are universally enforced in a internet type of setting for the most part, but acknowledge that it's not going to be that thing that helps us to cover the wealth gap. So one of the three things that I want to focus on as I wrap up, just kind of talking about this, and this will not be the first time that we talk about this, because it's not just buying black is a myth, it's what to do about it. And again, it's not that buying black is wrong. There is value to circulating your dollars. There's value to the empowerment. There's value to helping to stabilize the business, but this is not what's going to propel us as a community forward in a meaningful or tangible way, a way that really creates impact. And by that, again, I'm going to just assert that perspective is always so important. You could think something is large until you put it into perspective. So that's why I say we need to understand that even if we circulate these dollars and we create, everybody throws money into a pot, and that pot is going to grow. And then, and now we're booming and we're banging and everything is great. Like that, it's such a small drop in the bucket. All of Black America together is less than what JP Morgan and Chase have under assets, just that one company. So we need to be able to think on a different level and put some things in a perspective about what is considered big and so on and so forth. So the first thing is that we really, really need to push for policy around accessing capital. The current financial system, and I actually had a phone call with somebody where we were talking about this. Under the current financial system, the financial system either helps you or it hurts you. For most of us, it hurts us, right? We're getting 20% of us aren't banked. If you are banked and you get, an overdraft, that means you didn't have no money, and then they still charge you for the fact that you didn't have any money. It's expensive. It's a system that doesn't help people who are already disadvantaged and who are already struggling. So we need to be aware of that we need to really push for policies around accessing capital, because our businesses are either not funded, underfunded, or they cost more. And that's what I mean by those, higher interest rates, penalties, fees, et cetera, et cetera. So it does not put us or prime us to be in a position for success. So we really have to begin to push for policy around accessing capital. I cannot stress this enough. We need to push for policy that allows us greater access to capital, access to start our businesses, access to scale our businesses. And that is not happening. I can tell you that even as someone who has built several funding relationships and has been able to access capital for my organization, I still can't access the amount of capital that I asked for. It's always a lower amount. But like I said, we're either not funded, underfunded, or it costs more. So one is the policy thing. The second thing is we need to really work together to co-op on some of these industries. I was mentioning earlier when I talked about the manufacturing and the distribution and process and all of that we should be having, we should be on the other side than just the retail consumer side, right? So we need to be on the producing side. In order for us to get on the producing side, it is going to take some of us collapsing in, working together instead of being in competition with each other, and then putting our dollars together in order to break into the industry. You know, you got to break into a manufacturing industry. You're not just going to come because nobody's manufacturing something. You have to look at how you break into an industry, and part of that is going to require for us to work together to form something that we can then go in, pull our dollars together, and break into that industry. So we need to push for policy and accessing capital. We need to have co-ops to open up doors into industry, and we have to produce and own something. So we have to think about, you know, don't just call business ownership unless your business starts to have assets, unless you have contracts. You can sell contracts, right? Unless you have building space, or unless you have materials, or unless you have supplies. We have to produce and own. We have to produce and own, not consume. We have to produce. So we need to be thinking about how we are going to produce something on our own, break into these industries, and then fix the policy around accessing the capital in order for us to be able to do this. So I want to wrap up in that, and basically, you know, we're going to continue to break down some of these pieces, but I really wanted to spend a little bit of time at the top of the year, because we're going to still talk buying black. Like, that's not going away. So we're going to still talk about buying black, but as we do that, we have to understand what buying black is actually doing for us and what it's not doing for us. We cannot, you know, have these veiled conversations. We have to be very clear, very open with ourselves about how buying black affects us, and not to think that it is going to help close the wealth gap, because it's not. So this is just a tough topic for me. And I'm going to close. I just really want to acknowledge that this was just a tough topic to talk about, because I love the idea of buying black. I love the idea of how we support our community. We just have to be realistic and be upfront about what buying black actually does for the black community. And not to get me wrong, it does a lot, but it doesn't do what oftentimes we're promoting that it's going to do, which is, you know, help close this wealth gap. That's not what it's going to do. So with that, I just want to say thank you for joining us for another episode of Boss Up with BBI, y'all, where we are here every week talking about money and mindset in the black community. Some of these conversations is going to be tough this year. It's going to be tough this year, because we got to dig into it, y'all. We got to shift our mindset. We got to really understand how our money is working for us, and in a lot of cases, working against us. So I'm going to keep bringing it to you as I see it. We're going to keep jumping into topics where we're talking about things that are dealing with the way that we think. That is like super important, because how you think is essentially determines the majority of the time what it is that you do. So how we think needs to be addressed. And so we're going to keep digging into money. We're going to keep digging into mindset inside of the black community. This is another episode of Boss Up with BBI, y'all, and I will catch you next week.